The Midnight Train to Kunming. Liwei's chilling encounter. Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Today, I want to share a story that was told to me by a close friend, Levi. It's a story that's haunted him for years, and after you hear it, you might never look at train journeys the same way again. So, grab your headphones, dim the lights, and listen closely to the tale of the Midnight Train to Kunming. Part 1. The journey begins. Levi grew up in a small, misty town nestled in the mountains of Yunnan province. He'd always been a practical, down-to-earth guy, science-minded, not the type to believe in ghosts or superstitions. But his grandmother, a gentle old woman with a deep love for ancient stories, would always warn him, "The world is full of things we cannot see, Wei. Respect the old ways." It was winter, just after his university exams. Levi was exhausted and eager to get home for the Lunar New Year. He booked a ticket on the overnight train from Kunming, a trip he'd made many times before. The train was always busy this time of year, packed with students and workers heading home. But this time, as he arrived at the station, he noticed something odd. The platform was almost deserted. He shrugged it off, chalking it up to bad weather or a scheduling change. The train itself looked older than usual, the paint peeling, the windows fogged over. He found his seat by the window, stowed his bag, and settled in for the long ride. Part 2. The empty carriage. As the train pulled out of the station, Levi watched the city lights fade into the darkness. He listened to music, read a little, and soon drifted off, the gentle rocking of the train pulling him to sleep. He woke up with startle sometime after midnight. The carriage was freezing, his breath puffing out in little clouds. The lights overhead flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. He looked around. Every seat was empty. The other passengers, the conductor, even the snack cart, all gone. At first he thought maybe everyone had moved to another carriage. But when he tried to open the doors at either end, they wouldn't budge. He knocked and called out, "Hello? Hello? Is anyone there?" But only the echo of his own voice answered him. Levi returned to his seat, uneasiness settling in his stomach. He checked his phone. There, no signal. He tried to distract himself with a book, but he couldn't focus. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic sound of the train on the tracks. Part 3. The strange stop. Suddenly the train screeched to a halt, throwing Levi forward. He looked out the window and saw nothing but thick, swirling fog. The landscape was unfamiliar. No towns, no lights, just endless darkness, pale and blurred by the fog. As Levi watched, the train doors slid open with a hiss. The figures began to board, moving silently down the aisle. They wore clothes from different eras, some in old-fashioned tunics, others in modern jackets, a few in tattered uniforms that looked like they belonged to soldiers from long ago. Levi pressed himself against the window, heart pounding. The figures passed by him, their faces expressionless, eyes hollow. The air grew colder with each one that entered, and Levi felt a deep, bone-chilling dread. Part 4. The old woman. One figure stopped beside him, a frail old woman with long, tangled gray hair and sunken eyes. She stared at Levi, her gaze piercing. In a voice that sounded like the rustling of dead leaves, she whispered, "You don't belong here. Go back." Levi tried to speak, but his mouth was dry, his tongue heavy. The old woman reached out, her hand icy cold, and pressed something into his palm. A strange, small, smooth stone etched with strange symbols. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the figures moved on, disappearing into the next carriage. The doors slammed shut, the lights flickered, and Levi was alone again, like there was no one to begin with. Levi looked at his hand. The stone was gone, but he remembered the feeling. When the old woman pressed the stone into my palm, it was so cold it almost burned, sending a jolt up my arm. I kept telling myself it was just a dream, that I'd wake up any minute. But the fear was too real, too sharp, like ice in my veins. There's a special kind of terror in realizing you're completely alone, trapped in a place that should be familiar, but suddenly feels alien. Part 6. The Aftermath. When the train finally arrived at his hometown, Levi stumbled off, pale and shaken. His parents greeted him, but he barely heard their words. At home, he told his grandmother what had happened. She listened in silence, her face growing grave. She explained that in Chinese folklore there are ghost trains, spirit vehicles that travel between worlds, picking up souls lost or wandering. Sometimes the living are swept up by mistake, especially those who are tired, distracted, or vulnerable. She told him that the stone was a protective talisman, a gift from a benevolent spirit. "You were lucky," she said. "Someone was watching over you." Levi tried to move on, but strange things kept happening. He would wake up at night to the sound of a distant train whistle, even though there were no tracks nearby. Sometimes he'd find small stones on his windowsill, each one etched with the same mysterious symbols. Part 7. The Legacy. Years have passed since that night, but Levi never takes the night train anymore. He avoids traveling alone, especially during the ghost month, when the boundary between worlds is thinnest. He still has nightmares of empty carriages, silent passengers, and the old woman's warning. Sometimes he wonders what would have happened if he'd followed the figures into the next carriage, or if he hadn't accepted the stone. To this day, he keeps a small altar in his room, offering incense and prayers to the spirits. He says it's not about fear, but respect for the old ways, for the things we cannot see. And every year, on the anniversary of that journey, he leaves a stone by the tracks, a silent thank you to the spirit who saved him. So, next time you find yourself alone on a midnight train, remember Levi's story. Look out the window, listen for the whistle, and if a stranger offers you a stone, take it. You never know what world you might be passing through. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and share your own spooky travel experiences in the comments below. Until next time, travel safe and watch out for the midnight train.